That was what I was just going to announce. We are going to record this session so that any late arrivals or anyone who has connectivity problems will be able to get the information. My name is Bonnie Irwin. I am the Chancellor here at Hilo. And first I want to just welcome everyone to this session where we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can with as much information as we have today. I'm here with my leadership team, and we're each going to make a very brief presentation by way of overview, and then we will open it up for additional questions. A number of you submitted questions in advance, so we're going to try with our opening remarks to cover as many of those as possible in a general way. So again, thank you for being with us. Thank you to the students in the audience. Thank you for joining us at Hilo, and to family and supporters out there. Thank you as well. So I would ask that at least until we get to the Q&A, you keep your own selves muted while we present so we don't get too much feedback. We will also have the chat open, so if, you know, as you think about questions and you want to either put it in the chat or jot it down for later in the session, we'll be happy to get to as many as we possibly can. So without further ado, I am going to first introduce Vice Chancellor Calais Raposa, who has been in charge of the campus preparedness, the physical plant, testing, those kinds of things.
So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Calais Raposa. I'm the interim Vice Chancellor for Administrative Affairs at Hilo. I've been in charge of trying to get the campus physical plant ready for the start of the fall semester. Wanted to give all of you all a very brief update on that. So we are making adjustments to physical spaces, including classrooms, offices. With the classrooms, we are rearranging furniture where it can be arranged to provide for at least 6 feet of distancing. 6 feet of distancing between seats, and where we cannot provide or where we cannot remove seats, we are blocking them off. So we are taking measures to allow for social distancing in the classrooms. We are also upgrading classrooms to be Zoom compatible to allow for different modalities. So that work has been taking place over the summer, ramping up to over the next 3 weeks to make sure that we are ready for the start of school. We're also looking at working with one of our local health providers to provide options for testing on campus to be available to our campus community in the 3 weeks leading up to the start of school, and also having an option for some periodic testing on campus to be available for the campus community. We're trying to mix that in as well to allow some community benefit. So figuring out the logistics there. And briefly, so again, briefly, that's kind of what we've been doing leading up to the start of the school year. We've released physical distancing guidelines related to how people should interact. We have guidelines related to face coverings, requiring face coverings pretty much while you are on campus, unless you are isolated in an individual office. So this includes classrooms and common spaces as well. So I'll pass it on to Ken Hahn, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs.
Aloha, welcome everybody. So I'm the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, and it's been my job to put together the schedule for this fall. And so what I've worked hard with the faculty to do is to create a schedule that allows us to have many more online classes than we've previously been able to offer. So normally only about 15% of our offering is online. For this fall, we're going to have somewhere close to 85% of our, or about 85% of our classes will be available for online. I'm putting together a list that I'll post a link to a little bit later in here of all the classes that are available only by attending at the UH Hilo campus. That's about 15% of the classes, largely labs. And also classes, if you're in the pharmacy doctorate program or in the nursing BSN program, you're going to want to talk to your advisors because those programs require on-campus attendance as well. But mostly we'll be able to offer students the ability to attend from a distance this fall if that's what you decide that you would prefer to do. And you can make some arrangements if some of these labs that you wish to take aren't available via distance. You can also take these, make arrangements with your advisor to take an equivalent course at either a local school or someplace else that you can find it via distance. So we're here to help you kind of make these choices. I realize this is a difficult time trying to put schedules together, but we're trying to think of the safety of both faculty and students. So students have the option not to attend face-to-face if they don't feel comfortable to. And we have moved some of our classes online to accommodate faculty for the same reasons that they have health reasons or something that doesn't permit them to be in the classroom. So I'll be available for more classes or more questions at the end of this, and I'll post a link in just a few minutes onto the chat part of this meeting. Thank you. I believe this goes to Farah now, our Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs.
Thank you, Ken. And aloha to all of our students and our family members who are joining us today. Thank you for making the time. I know that some of you are anxious to get to the questions that you submitted or any questions that you might have. So I will try to keep this as brief as possible, but also try to provide some level of detail so you are aware of how members in the Student Affairs Division has been working to make adjustments to how we provide support to students, both during the summer in preparation for fall, but also what fall 2020 activities might look like. So for those of you who may not be aware, admissions, financial aid, disability services, advising, student life center, testing center are a number of the units that fall under my division. I don't have enough time to go into the complexities of all of them, but I would like to reassure all of you that these units have been working continuously over the summer to address both social distancing, safety precautions, and also to adjust some level of their programming, because we realize that a number of students are going to choose to stay at home, wherever home might be, anywhere around the world right now, at least for the fall semester. So we want to make sure that we are able to still help meet your needs and ensure your success on your journey. Our offices remain open 7:45 to 4:30 over the summer. Although some staff members are working remotely, they are answering emails and answering phone calls. So please continue to reach out to our offices. And if you have any questions about services that aren't answered through our offices, you can always email my office as well. I do want to maybe focus a bit on housing, because that is one of the areas that many parents and students have had questions on. So to give you an overview, we have de-densified our residence halls on campus so that we are able to ensure safer spaces for all of our students. So instead of being able to house over 900 students in the fall, we are limiting that to just over 600 students. What this means is that we have had to reduce the number of students who used to live in apartments or residence or rooms that could accommodate 4 people. Those are only accommodating 2 people. And some of our rooms that used to accommodate 2 people are only going to accommodate 1. And again, this is for safety measures. And we're especially concerned about those halls that also share a common restroom. And so at this point, we are also providing additional cleaning supplies and sanitization stations within all of the residence halls. We encourage students to use those supplies and equipment as much as possible. We will be restocking as needed throughout the semester. To welcome students back at the beginning of the semester, we will be doing check-in a little different for those of you who have been with us before. We will have staggered check-in, and the details for that will be sent out only to those students who are in our residence halls. So we realize, students, that you have been getting an abundant amount of emails from us. Thank you to those of you who are reading them, asking questions, and responding. In these next few weeks, we are going to get a little bit more tailored in our communication, and we're going to ask for your assistance in that, because those of you who have questions about quarantine, we want to answer your questions without also burdening the email inboxes of those students who are not necessarily impacted by quarantine. So I'll get to that in just a minute. Other details about housing that some of you have asked about. We will be allowing 2 members, whether those are family members or friends, to assist residents on their check-in. I do want to caution that this number could change at any time. We realize that students oftentimes will need support and assistance in moving in. If 2 becomes too many for that assistance, we may restrict that to 1. But again, we will be communicating to our resident students with that information. At this time, UH Hilo feels strongly that we want to support the development and the cultivation of community within our residence halls. So we are continuing to allow our resident students to have guests. However, it comes with one limitation this year. Those guests must be connected to the UH community, meaning a faculty, a staff, or a student. Currently, the UH Hilo campus is still closed to the general community, general public. And so this is not just in alignment with that policy, but this is also as a precautionary measure to make sure that those who are entering our residence hall spaces are limited to those who are coming to our campus. Again, health and safety of all of our students is our highest priority. Like other policies, the guest policy may be changed with very little warning at all. If we see irresponsible behavior, if we see things that may increase liability, increase risk to our residents, we may adjust that policy. But our residence life staff will be having conversations with students to ensure that we are all assuming some level of responsibility in this joint endeavor. Then lastly, I will say that our residence hall dining hall will be having we'll be making some adjustments. For those of you who were with us in the spring, you know that we very swiftly changed to takeout only. And while we want to be able to open up the dining hall to allow dine-in, that is going to be a decision made with our food service provider to ensure that we can remain in compliance with both the governor's proclamations, but also the mayor of Hawaii County's rules that are also changing very rapidly at this time. Some of you are still on the wait list for housing. We have just under 100 students who are still on the wait list. This Friday is the deadline for the second round of assignments. And so if you are still on the wait list, it is because you submitted an application after May. We have been able to get through assignment for all students in May. So if your application came in June or July, we ask for your continued patience. We are moving through that list as quickly as possible. But again, with reduced number of spaces, that has been a challenge for us right now. We expect additional assignments to take place later next week. I know there are a separate set of questions regarding quarantine, and Chancellor Irwin will be addressing that. So I will leave you all with this. Within an hour of the ending of this brown bag, students will receive an email from my office that is going to ask very simple questions, no more than 7 questions, should take no more than 3 or 4 minutes. I'm asking your cooperation to please submit a response to that survey as soon as possible. it will help us identify how we can narrow in our communication to those of you with specific questions, but also to keep our lines of communication open. We anticipate sending at least one informative email per week from now to the start of the semester, because we realize there are many questions, and unfortunately, we will not have all of the answers, but we will try our best to consolidate information from our governor, from our mayor, and from our system on what some of those adjustments to policies and guidelines might be. So again, mahalo everyone for joining us today. Chancellor, back to you.
Okay, in reviewing the questions the people submitted in advance, a number of them were on quarantine. I will do a side note on another question. Someone asked about athletics, and by that I presume intercollegiate athletics. A final decision will be made on that later this week, but the 3 Hawaii schools in our conference have asked for a postponement of spring sports. I imagine that will be honored for Hilo, Chaminade, and Hawaii Pacific. That is the current proposal under review, and we will know more by the end of the week. And athletics will get that communication out to our student athletes as soon as we have a definitive answer. Quarantine. As some of you may have read in the media, there is a modified quarantine in effect for Oahu and Kauai. It does not apply to this island and to the University of Hawaii at Hilo. Our mayor is much more conservative. This island is a small community. We respect and honor his decisions, and we will, of course, be abiding by it because they hold the force of law. Therefore, we are planning for quarantine for the full 14 days. I would add that the modified quarantine that is in place for Oahu and Kauai does not include family members. It was just an exception for students themselves. So parents of students at those campuses will be facing some of the same challenges that families here are. So 14 days in quarantine. We are currently negotiating with some off-campus sites for this quarantine to take place. We do not want to quarantine on campus because other students will be moving in, and because of roommate assignments and various other things, we do not want to mix people coming in who are still under quarantine with the students who are in-state students who do not have those quarantine obligations. The quarantine rules are pretty clear. The governor's 10th proclamation and then the county orders, for which we can supply you with links if you haven't already seen them, are fairly specific about the rules for quarantining. Unless you are members of the same household, you have to quarantine separately. So I did hear from at least one parent who said, well, you know, my students coming, a friend of theirs, they've been spending time together all summer, and unless they live in the same domicile, they cannot quarantine in the same space. We do hope to cover some of the cost, and that is why the survey results are going to be very important, because once we get a sense of how many students are actually going to try to come to Hilo in August, we will know how many quarantine spaces we need, and we will know better how much funding we have to assist with it. We'll do as much as we can, but I can't promise that we can cover every room for the whole 2 weeks. Meals will be at the student's expense, and we will do our best to make sure that these places have arrangements for food delivery. Those things are all still under negotiation. We will be on campus checking in with all students daily who have arrived from out of state, doing a kind of mental and physical wellness check, ask them how they're doing, how they're feeling. but also engaging them in online activities. So at least one person asked, will my student have opportunity to meet some of the staff and faculty? Well, we will have at least one staff member reaching out to every student who is under quarantine. That will help them stay connected. We have some of our orientation activities are online, just as Vice Chancellor Gomes was describing. So of course one can do that whether they're at home or here on island under quarantine. We will be paying attention to when various quarantines expire, and at that point and only then will students be allowed to move into campus facilities. If the numbers are very small and we feel that we can safely quarantine on campus, we will do so, but that is not really a likely possibility. Again, partly because of the move-in activities and wanting to keep the rest of the community as safe as possible. Now, I'm not operating under the assumption that every student coming from out of state is a carrier, but we are very, very careful on this island to control this. And we will, again, do our best. If you already have a reservation somewhere in town for returning in August, I would check in with that location, whether it be a hotel. Short-term rentals are not allowed for quarantine purposes. So if you already have made a reservation for something, I would check with that host to verify whether the location is approved for quarantining. Students are also, or visitors are not allowed to take public transportation when they arrive to get to their location. We are discussing whether or not the university can provide this transportation or not, and we will have updates. Again, a lot of this is going to be determined on how many people we are talking about and how many students we are trying to accommodate. Once under quarantine, and again, I commend the governor and mayor's restrictions and guidelines to everyone's careful reading. But once here and in your quarantine location, you may only leave that location for medical emergencies. There are no other things. And this includes, if you're staying at a hotel, going down and using the pool, those things are not allowed. One must stay in one's room. I will tell you that the penalty for breaking quarantine is a year in jail, $5,000 fine, up to those limits, and this island has cited multiple people for breaking quarantine. I know there's a lot of chat in the chat box between a local student, I believe, and some of the families, and we are making every precaution we feel we can and accommodate the students as best we can in their learning journeys here at UH Hilo. So that is what we know today. A week ago, we could have said that, well, maybe, this island will be part of the modified quarantine. I can say absolutely that that is not going to happen. We are going to be under full quarantine as long as the state quarantine for visitors is in effect. There will be no exceptions for our students. So as we've presented the various information to you today, one of the things that I think each student and family needs to consider is whether it is in your best interest to travel here for the fall semester or not. If you feel that you can take all your classes and engage in the activities you want to engage in while staying at wherever home is, you may want to consider that. If you are part of a degree program that is going to require some face-to-face, you have a couple of options. You can work with an advisor to see if those particular courses can be deferred for your personal educational journey, or whether or not it is in your best interest to come or third option, find a place locally to take the class, although we would of course prefer that you take a Hilo class. So that is what I know. We can now open for questions, and I think probably want to do a raised hand format. I see one person has raised a hand because I have already discussed these matters, I believe, with that student. I'd like to honor a couple of other questions first. All right. Mr. Warfield, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Is there, you talked about quarantine locations. When are we going to know what they are? And if the student has somewhere to stay that's not one of those locations, is there some kind of proof of quarantine that would be required?
That is a state, when you arrive on the, in the state and in the island, you have to fill out paperwork that essentially says where you will be staying. And so if you have family or another place that you can stay here, I believe that that is allowed. You will have to, again, read the proclamation to definitely determine that. We will get you information as soon as possible on the locations that we will do have the quarantining. We're still negotiating contracts. It will most likely be at some of our, couple of our local hotels, but that is still under agreement. We're gonna get it to you as soon as we can.
So, and when the student arrives, will they be met with somebody who would have the paperwork?
The paperwork is, I mean, just like when if you've ever traveled to Hawaii before, you have to fill out a form, egg form. And it's essentially a variation of that. I believe there may be a copy of the form online that says the kind of things that you need to fill in.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I've got some people raising their hands and some people using the thumbs up. So I saw Janelle Alphen first. So if you want to go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can my student quarantine on another island before coming to Hilo if we have a place to stay?
That's fine. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Nice. Chancellor, if I can add to that.
Please.
If you're going to quarantine on another island, it is suggested that you plan to do the full 14-day quarantine there. You may not actually be allowed to get on a flight at the airport if you're not able to show that the full 14-day quarantine was completed. So we do suggest that you keep documentation of your travel plans in case they are asked for at the airport.
Okay. And do the dorms when do the dorms at Hilo open up so we could plan our 2-week travel before that?
The first day of check-in is August 18.
Okay.
Chancellor, before you go to the next question, I see some people raising their hands in their cameras, and maybe we can just let everybody know that if you have a question, if you can go down to, what is it, which feature is it? And raise your, if you press the, because what Chancellor is asking is for people to unmute and ask their question when she sees the raised hand on the side of the sidebar. So if folks can find the raised hand icon in their dashboard, that's how Chancellor will be able to see your raised hand.
And as another opportunity, if it's easier in the reactions piece, I know some of you are doing the clapping hands or the thumbs up, and that will also get our attention. So we've got a number of various ways of sort of raising hands. So Mr. Cobbs, are you still kind of raised and lowered here? So you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, now I was trying to unmute. So I had a couple questions real quickly. So the first question is there any opportunity for a student if they decide they don't want to do online and they can't get in to defer? And if so, how long would that be accepted?
You mean defer admission?
Yes.
Farah, do you want to take that?
I will take that. We are currently already having that same question for many students. So we are already deferring to the spring semester. That would require any additional admissions application. But if farther than that is a question, do speak with our admissions counselors and they can walk you and your child through that process.
Okay, and to build off of that, he would, we live in Washington and we have that WUI scholarship. Would that be continued if we decided to do that in the spring?
Yes, if you defer to the spring, we would still be able to honor all of the conditions that were offered in the fall.
Okay, and then last question, not to dominate, I apologize, but if we wanted to come in after September 1st, let's say, and there's still that chance to do the COVID test instead of the 14-day quarantine, can you start a portion of the classes online and then transition, or is there a decision one way or the other before the start of orientation?
That's a loaded question. So first of all, no, it's okay, it's okay. We are not sure that the quarantine restrictions will in fact be lifted after September 1. So we caution families about planning for a delayed start because everything could change just like how it did from August 1.
Join the meeting.
So what your second question was about potentially joining remotely and then transitioning to Hilo. So I will defer to Vice Chancellor Han to provide the details to the back end of your question there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for letting me talk. So what I've asked faculty to do, and I'm going to reiterate, is to accommodate the first 2 weeks of school online to make sure that any of the classes, as we can anyways, as many as the classes that have required activities that are in person, try to divert those from the first 2 weeks of school if possible, or at least have a makeup for people that are quarantined. So I think if you're going to do that, once your student's schedule is set, then you can go ahead and contact the instructors that if they're in any classes that require a face-to-face presence, that you can communicate that you will be quarantining or coming in a little bit late. But you should be able to start classes on the 24th online without any problem.
Okay, excellent. Thank you guys for doing this and appreciate all your answers.
That was one of the questions I saw that came up in the chat as well. The other thing I would say is that someone asked about a stipend. If we can cover any or all of lodging expenses, we will probably be doing it as a direct bill to the hotel, from the hotel to us, because our attorneys have advised us that that is actually the better course of action for tax liability. I did pose the question about other alternatives at a meeting yesterday, and I should have a more specific answer soon to see if there's any other options about that. All right, Ms. Kane, I'm going to unmute you for your question. Well, it's actually not letting me do that. I guess I'm not one of the hosts. There we go. Alexandra, you're on.
Oh, okay. This is actually for mom. And my question is, if you have somebody that's off campus housing that's a student, can our student house with them for quarantine?
It's going to have to be decided on a case-by-case basis. If it is safe to isolate from the other residents, then that should be possible if that is the student's permanent residence. So for our students who aren't going to be here in campus housing, who are going to be living in apartments or other places in Hilo, they could go directly to that place, but they need to be able to isolate from any other resident in that place. And, you know, we take quarantining very seriously. Quarantining means isolating from other people with whom you have not been living. So you really have to be checking in with the residents of that that place and their situation as well.
Okay, and
Can I just add too that that's going to be
hotel
governed
housing,
by the county who will be checking on you. So that arrangement isn't something, if you're off campus, isn't something the school handles directly, but is actually under state and county government regulation.
okay. So
Yeah.
what we're concerned with is booking something now. We've seen a flux in airline tickets already in the last 3 days. So the whole month of August was wide open. And now the whole month of August is gone except for a few days here and there. The same is going to start happening with hotels. So we're concerned with how fast and when is this all going to take place. We're running out of days.
We are, and we are going to try to, in terms of arrangements with the hotel, we would be trying to, as part of our contract, reserve a block of rooms so that you wouldn't necessarily have to make reservations on your own. But I honestly today can't tell you exactly how long that's going to take us to arrange.
Okay, we've scheduled flights for like the 8th now of August so that they can get through quarantine before classes start. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And again, we'll get you as much information as we can. I mean, I can't stress enough the survey that we're going to be sending out today, because once we have a sense of numbers, everything else becomes a lot easier for us to determine.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and move on to Raul Flores.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my question was in regards to whether there's a decision as to whether we'll be expected to return to in-person classes after Thanksgiving break. I know some schools have already decided that they won't resume that, being that a lot of people go home and will bring that potentially to the campus.
I will let Ken Hahn answer this, but I will answer first, then he can correct me if I get anything wrong. We have asked that faculty allow for online finals to accommodate that. So we are starting on time on August 24th, and the term will end as scheduled. But I believe for all of our classes, if you chose to return home at Thanksgiving, you would be able to finish out the semester from there. Am I right, Ken?
That is correct, except for pharmacy and possibly nursing. Pharmacy, if you're in the PharmD program, you'll know you're in the PharmD program because you're paying about way more times the tuition than everybody else. So that's a small cohort, and they're talking to all their students. But for everybody else, what I've asked everyone to do is just think that we have a population of students that are not only at distance, but some that are immune compromised or live with immune compromised people that we want to make sure that we serve in these conditions, right? So the idea is that even if a faculty is having a face-to-face final, that they also have to have an alternative online final. So unless that course is specifically marked as requires face-to-face attendance, and most of those for the normal undergraduate are going to be STEM labs. It's about 15% of our courses, and I posted the link. I'll repost it because it seems to have disappeared, but I'll post the link of the list of those classes. Everything else is going to allow you to attend online. So if you leave at Thanksgiving and don't want to return, you can just finish out the semester of your classes online and take your finals online, or whatever the final project that the teacher works out for that. And I will reiterate with even the people that are requiring face-to-face that, you know, I really don't want the STEM labs to offer required face-to-face after Thanksgiving either. So it should even allow you that option.
Okay, now I noticed some of you are using different methods of raising your hand. So I'm actually going to call on Eben Bergeron. You've been trying to get a question in for a while.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
My question, one of my questions is if you guys are going to cancel athletics for the fall, and my daughter has a scholarship through you guys for cross country, which is the first set of sports, is that going to be honored?
As far as I know, yes. I can't imagine it wouldn't be. So I will check in with our athletic director. I will see him later today. Once the Pac West decision is made later this week, then we will be sending out information to all of our athletes. The reason we're talking about postponing rather than canceling is precisely for that, to remain eligible for possible spring play, as well as to allow for training. So if we were to just cancel, we would not be able to do the training and practices. But if we postpone, we can still do all that, and we can honor the scholarships as well.
Okay.
That is currently.
All right. And then my other question, obviously it sounded like you guys said that you would allow students to do their classes online while they're in quarantine. And then also, I guess, you know, in conjunction with that, obviously some students, you know, planned on working all summer right before they came to save money. So that I would see as a request as a parent that happens, so that they, you know, we don't have to show up 2 weeks prior. And then being able to allow that to be a buffer period for being that wasn't in a normal game plan. And then also my other question, obviously I understand it's hard for you guys to figure out, but, you know, if you're paying for a food package for your kids to have food through your cafeteria, and then they're in quarantine and not utilizing for that for 2 weeks, is there going to be some sort of reimbursement in that? Or, I mean, I hate to nitpick, but it just comes down to like the reality of some of this stuff.
No, I'm going to let Farah answer that second question, but regarding the first, you know, we anticipated that the quarantining arrangements that different students and families would make would be kind of staggered. In an ideal world, everyone gets here early enough to do all that quarantining before classes begin, but we understand that for some of you, that's simply not possible. And I'll ask Farah to talk about dining contracts.
Okay.
Absolutely. We are very much aware of the changing details, and we know that this Friday is another important date for students and their families to make a decision about committing to space. We are offering refunds. The refund period is completely still wide open at this point. And if you have questions about committing to the space before Friday's deadline because you are in the current round of assignments, I suggest you contact our housing department. They have been walking families through the decision-making process. We know that it's not easy. And if you change your mind because of new information, we are also taking that information into account in the decisions on refunds.
All right, next up, Scott Mead, the question.
Okay, hello. We're parents of the incoming freshmen, and today's the first time we heard of the requirement that quarantining students be from the same household. We looked at a lot of quarantine info to plan our students' trip there and never saw that before. Is that something available that you could point to or put on the website for confirmation or clarification?
Yes, we can post the link. It is actually off of one of our state of Hawaii government websites, and I believe the language is more along the lines of with individuals that you live with. So I will find that link and pop it into the chat box in just a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Pat, last name unknown. You're next.
Oh, you got it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, we also have an incoming freshman this year, and we've been a little bit concerned about, with all the social distancing and face covering requirements, making new friends. Seems like it's going to be kind of difficult. So she was very excited about the living learning community option, and we were just wondering whether, since all these students are going to be quarantining ahead of time, is there going to be any ability for students who are in those living learning communities to form these kinds of pods or bubbles where they can actually get together and participate in activities as was originally scheduled? Is that a possibility at all?
We cannot do anything that violates the quarantine rules, so there will be no bubbling in advance of the 14 days being over, but I can have Farah talk about what will happen after the quarantine. We can do our best in terms of online to try to connect people with one another, social media, things like that, but we can't allow any physical interaction until the quarantine is expired. And Farah, do you want to say anything else about the LLCs?
Sure. So the LLC programming will actually start on the first week of classes. And for those who are in quarantine, they can still join that remotely. Thereafter, they will be able to engage with the other members of the LLC as would normally be planned. We are also, for those members, for those students who are going to be in quarantine, some of our programs will be reaching out to those students. There will be at least one person assigned to every student in quarantine. We will be doing a daily check-in. We feel this is important just to make sure that students feel connected. They can let us know if there are any needs. We can help already start bridging relationships with the campus. But we will be asking certain programs to also deliver some of their activities and services in a virtual format to our students in quarantine, which is why it's going to be important for us to get the information back from the survey so we know which students are going to be in quarantine, and we know the level of those students and the appropriate types of programming that we will be delivering in that virtual format for the 14-day period.
Okay, that's great. I'm really happy to hear that after the quarantine, they'll be able to interact. So that's fantastic. Thank you.
So we have just a few minutes left, but everyone on my team is willing to stay a little bit longer. We knew an hour probably wouldn't be sufficient. I'm gonna let Allie give you some communication updates about how we're gonna be reaching out beyond the survey that's coming. So Allie, you wanna jump in? And then after Allie, I'm gonna call on Ushi DeRose. I've seen you raise your hand a few times.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining in. In the chat box, I'm going to be including information so you can subscribe for you parents who want to join our parents e-newsletter. And that will be sent out quarterly and parents updates. So information that is sent to your student, you will also receive information. So I'm in the chat box and we hope you subscribe. Thank you.
We also plan to schedule another of these sessions when we have updated information. So we will not only be pushing things out via email and newsletters, but also we can arrange for another one of these sessions. We want to wait though until we have something new to report. So Ushi, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Chancellor, and thank you for your team as well to make this available to us parents. The question I had was with regards to housing. So we need to make a decision by this Friday. My daughter's an incoming freshman. She would love to come to Hawaii. We had everything already set to do that. Now the 14-day quarantine has kind of thrown a wrench into that. is there a way to extend that deadline for the housing to maybe another couple of weeks? So maybe Governor Ige will make a decision that the 72-hour testing would be allowed for September. I'm not sure if that's even a thing, but my daughter would really love to come, and I would hate to lose the money for the housing if I have to make a decision by Friday. Thank you.
I'm going to allow Farah to talk about the specifics of the deadline. You know, I have to say that I am not super optimistic about September 1st, given how many times we have thought about opening and then have delayed. So I wouldn't necessarily bank on that because there's just so much we don't know. But Farah, do you want to talk about the deadline?
Absolutely. And I will actually go farther than Chancellor and say I'm not at all optimistic that September 1 will actually be the date, which is why I keep cautioning parents on this, right? It is a hard decision for us to, it is a hard position for us to also be in because we do have students on the wait list. And so we understand the frustration and we understand that there are many more questions than answers. So we apologize. I would recommend at this point that families finding themselves in that situation, again, reach out to our housing director, Sherry Akau. I think the best we can do at this point is place those families on a wait list, honor those students who are still committed and wanting to be here on August 24. And as the situations unfold, if we can accommodate the families who are interested in coming at a later date, then we make those accommodations as well. What we don't know is how many students who have committed to the spaces already may decide to cancel. And so it is very much in flux. We are trying to accommodate as many people as possible, but we know we're not doing a good job of making everyone happy either. So if you can reach out to Director Akau, and I am actually meeting with her at 2 o'clock today. So I will give her a heads up that she may have an influx of calls, but this is what we're here for. We'll do the best we can to accommodate as many students and their families as possible.
So someone asked if we can send a link to this recording. We will try our best to do so. I admit I'm not a Zoom expert myself, but we are making a recording which should be shareable. Farah, we also have another question concerning housing. If someone were to opt to stay home for fall, do they need to reapply for housing then for spring? I think that's a question actually a lot of families will have.
Yes, the application is a rolling process. We do normally have less students in the spring than in the fall. So in a normal year, I would say the chances of getting in are very good. This is anything but a normal year. And so I cannot give you that assurance either. However, I can say that if the trend were to continue based on our historic numbers and the percentage of students that we place in housing from fall to spring, we should still be able to accommodate the number of students that are incoming in the spring semester. And the other thing is, if the situation with the virus does improve, we will also be able to allow more students to live in shared spaces. So there are many factors that would change the outcome for what spring is. It's too early to tell, but I remain optimistic on that point that spring will be a very different story for us.
Okay, Farah, you have a couple of other questions in the chat that are student affairs related. One, orientation on 8/19, is that in person or remote?
So the portion that begins on August 19th is in person and takes place on campus, and that is for 2 days, August 19th and 20th.
And we do have some online portions as well that students can participate in some activities that way. There's also a question from Ashley Plum about housing that's fairly specific, so maybe you want to try to answer that in the chat if you can. Here's another question that may not be of a lot of people, but someone asked their daughter is scheduled to graduate in December. yes, I would say that barring a miracle, commencement will not be face-to-face. We just can't put all those people in the gym the way we typically do for December commencement. We will be doing some virtual programming around commencement as we did in spring, and we're exploring other things we might do based on what some of the high schools in Hawaii did this last spring in terms of drive-through and things like that. But the formal commencement in the same space with all the pomp and circumstance, we are not planning for it this time. I just don't think it's possible. So I am going to ask Wong L. If you want to ask your question.
Oh, yes. So one of the questions was, how do you get from the airport to your place of quarantine, since you can't rent a car or call a ride service? Am I on mute?
Yeah. I believe taxis are still an option, and we are looking into shuttling, but we have not yet determined whether we're going to be able to do that. If we did use a shuttle, people would have to be, you know, at a decent distance from one another, although I realize you all just came off a plane, so distancing may not be as big of an issue, but we want to provide that as much as possible, as well as make arrangements for cleaning shuttles in between trips to the airport. So if we can figure out those logistics, we may be able to do it ourselves.
Okay, and then in regards to the housing deposit that's due on Friday, will that hold space for arrival anytime? I mean, if we can't do the quarantine in time for the start of school, and then it doesn't even occur until the middle of September, for instance, would the housing still be there?
Yes. So the $200 deposit would commit your space, and that is what triggers the charge to the student's account. So I did also see a question about this Friday versus the 31st. So let me clarify that as well. For those students who were most recently assigned a space, the deadline to commit to that space and secure that with the $200 deposit is this Friday. For those who were assigned in a previous round, that deadline has already passed. The full payment deadline is next week, Friday, the 31st of July. So that's the difference for both of those dates. And again, the $200 commitment and the response to the assignment email is what confirms and secures a student space for fall 2020.
Okay, because we're not sure, given air travel, how this is really all going to work for us, because there's many flights from the San Francisco Bay Area to Honolulu, but there aren't any direct flights to the Big Island. So everything has to go through Honolulu and then to the Big Island, and I guess to Hilo because it's closer.
And then I had another question. So if the student does get, if the hotels are arranged and the student gets a room to quarantine in a hotel there through the school, a parent cannot stay with that student, you know, the parent who lives with the student here in the States cannot come over and stay with the student.
Actually, you can stay in the room with the students if you are part of the same household on wherever you're coming from. So if you live together now,
I'm sorry, I missed that. I saw in the questions that it said no, but then now you're saying it's okay.
no, if you live together now,
Yes.
you can quarantine in the same space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chancellor, if we can clarify, if the university is paying for that quarantine space, however, we can only allow the student to stay in that space.
That's
so
what I was
parents wanting to accompany their child in quarantine, the family would need to cover the costs for that quarantine stay.
Okay. We have to make our own arrangements. Okay. Sorry. That's what I was trying to understand. Okay.
And I missed that detail in the chat. So someone
and then
asked,
let me If I can add one more detail, because it's related to that question, because it is a question in the FAQ. So our offer in providing rooms is to help accommodate students who were not planning for this detail at all and may not have the ability to coordinate this on their own. Families are still able to plan their own quarantine. And so to answer the question in the chat, if you book your own hotel or motel room, because those are the two types of locations that are allowed, you can allow whomever to be in that space, right? The University of Hawaii at Hilo has no authority to tell you who can and cannot be in a space that you secure. All we can tell you is the guidance is there and we encourage you to follow them, but we are not the entity to enforce that. So I just wanted to make ourselves clear that we can only enforce for the rooms that we would be covering either partially or fully.
Okay, thank you.
A number of student questions have come up in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and answer a few of those and then go back to the list here. Yes, you can fly. You can go through Honolulu and arrive at Hilo before you quarantine. They're not going to stop you if you have a reservation to fly all the way through to this island. But of course, you won't be allowed to leave the airport and have to deal with whatever rules they have in place at Honolulu Airport. I will admit to you, I have not been in Honolulu Airport since March, so I'm not fully up to date in terms of everything that's going on there. Someone asked about hostels, and Vice Chancellor Raposa has answered that. I highly doubt a hostel is on the list. The current guidance from the governor says hotel and motel. So if you have made any other arrangements, I would call to verify, but I'm relatively certain that a hostel would not be allowed. Will UH Hilo pay only for quarantine location for students paying for housing? We are trying to accommodate all students needing quarantine, whether you are supposed to be living on campus or not, but the extent to which and how much we'll be able to cover is still under advisement, again, until we get a confirmation of numbers. I understand from one of the windows I don't have open that Joaquin Robinette has been trying to ask a question for a while, and then I'll go back to the raised hand. So Joaquin, are you out there? Okay, not seeing him. I'm going to move on to, oh, there you are. Okay, found you. Trying to unmute you now.
Hello.
Okay, you want to go ahead?
Hear us? Hi. I'm Jeff, Joaquin's dad. This is Joaquin. A lot of the questions have already been answered, but one quick question. We too are in the San Francisco Bay Area, and Joaquin already has a reservation for housing. How soon might we know whether you're going to extend things in regard to the mandatory non-refundable deposit that's due at the end of the week? Because I checked earlier, we're really familiar with Hilo. We normally stay at the Nani Loa, and it's completely booked for the entire month of August. We did rent a home, but because of the latest stuff, they're not honoring that anymore. So I guess what we're trying to find out is the sooner you guys can get us information, because we're in limbo just like everybody else. We were told, and maybe you have some clarification on this, if you get a negative COVID test within a certain period of time, 48 hours to your travel, will that negate the 14-day mandatory quarantine? It won't do that. Okay.
The governor had originally hoped to put that into effect on August 1st. It has now been delayed till September 1st at the earliest, and that's the thing that we're saying that we're not too optimistic about. So I wouldn't count on that. I'm a little surprised that the Nani Loa is showing itself as fully booked. We will be reaching out to the hotels here in the next couple of days to see what their level is, so we can get answers quickly. Sarah?
I can add a little bit to that. it is not that, okay, so I cannot speak for the non-Eloa because we haven't had that follow-up conversation, but I can tell you another local hotel is showing little or no occupancy only because they have blocked it off of their reservations, right? It's not that they're full, it is that they are not taking the reservations at this time. So
That was it.
yeah, we are mindful of that and working with them. In fact, I just got off the phone this morning with one of the other ones that we are working with. So we're very much in communication with them, and we will be providing additional information about the locations very shortly.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Adair, and then I see Armando has been raising a hand as well. So Adair, you want to go ahead? You're still muted.
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Just wanted to, obviously, I think a lot of the same questions about logistics. You know, we have a freshman coming to the school, and if they're going to check in on August 18th, we have to book the flights now, right? Because it's within the 2-week window. What are you thinking about these this potential block of rooms? I mean, what's the odds that you're going to get that block of rooms? Can you comment about that? Because obviously, that's the most important thing, where they're going to stay when they get there.
We will have a block of rooms. I can guarantee that. What I cannot guarantee is the date that we will be able to announce that, because that is held up in contract conversations. But I can say we will have rooms available, and I also cannot say the amount of rooms, but that's why that survey information is going to help us further be able to refine our conversations with the lodging entities. We actually have 4 lodging entities that we are in communication with at this time. So I do want to assure folks that quarantine spaces will be available for our UH Hilo students.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Armando, I'm going to unmute you to speak. Actually, it's not letting me do it, so I think you do it yourself. There you go.
Thank you so much. It's basically the same question with housing with our freshmen coming in. We have been guaranteed a dorm room. I have 2 concerns. A, I've seen the classroom setups that you guys have said that they will be. I'm scared that I will be paying out of pocket housing, food, and once our students arrive, maybe half of their classrooms will be online, opposed to right now being told that they will be in class. So I'm kind of skeptical about that, because we do not apply for any financial aid, so we're paying out of pocket. And 2, if we do give up our space, is there any way, obviously, because students are giving up their spot due to these concerns, would you guys be willing to put them on a first come, first come, first serve waiting list right now for the spring semester? Give them first priority, since they are giving up that spot right now, as my student is, willing to give. So that's our little concern. And then when will you guys be knowing if you guys do block in the hotels for the students to quarantine? How much will Hilo be providing that cost? Because it's a pandemic throughout the US. A lot of people are unemployed, not, receiving full salaries, or like us, we're self-employed, so we don't even get any unemployment checks. So this is basically it's becoming a hardship all around, even though we saved up for 18 years. Sorry.
And we do understand that. Regarding how much we're going to pay, you need to answer the survey and answer it as accurately as you can based on your plans right now. Once we get a number, we'll know how far our funding will go. As you know, the federal government has dispersed CARES monies to the university, which we've used for a number of purposes, but we have set aside some of those to pay for some of these lodging costs. So we're going to cover as much of it as we can. And then talking about the room, not the meals. Meals will be, no matter what we arrange, meals will be the responsibility of
under our cost.
Farah, do you want to talk about prioritizing spring housing reservations?
Sure. I will say that we have already had similar requests, and we are keeping a list of those students that ultimately what we're tracking is those students that were provided an assignment and declined that. So we can go back through all of that, and similar to what you're saying is honor the intent, but because of the current situation, not able to attend and try to prioritize them. So I cannot fully commit and say we are able to do that, because priority would be given to students who are in the space and apply by the priority deadline. Right thereafter, we have a little bit of flexibility, and that's where we might be able to insert the priority list of those students who gave up fall. We're certainly willing to look at what our numbers look like and what our capacity is going to be. Let me say that if we are back to more normal operations in spring, though, we would easily be able to honor that. I could give you that guarantee.
Now, the chances of how we've seen that your classes are set up right now, she's being told all her classes will be in class, but what if she arrives and half of her classes, you know, are online? That's one of my fear as a parent, that I'm paying everything out of pocket.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and address that. Now, I want to be perfectly honest with everybody. Just because of the space considerations, when we talk about face-to-face, it's only going to be at best 50% of the time that you would normally have, because our classroom sizes are at best 50% of their normal size, and in many cases only about a third of their normal size. So there'll be students will be assigned to a rotating schedule. If it's a Tuesday, Thursday class, they may only be attending on Tuesdays if they're here for face-to-face. We just can't fit people in. We have about 850 scheduled course sections this coming semester, and about 150 that need them the most to the bigger classrooms to get more students in. We haven't quite done that magic yet. We're waiting to see how enrollment continues to go in the classes, but next week we'll start rearranging designated classrooms. But I don't want to give people the hope that everything's going to be normal. We just can't keep kids safe and put them all into a classroom every day, right? So safety is coming first, and then the class experience is second. And it's the same thing with our labs. I think a lot of our labs are going to be run so you go in, you use the equipment, you collect your data, but you're going to do your data analysis back online with help from your professor online instead of face-to-face. You know, so, and we'll have smaller field trips. That'll be the good news, but they'll be less frequent than they normally would be, right, to accommodate all the students that actually show up. But we won't actually know a lot of this until we find out how many people are coming here in person, right, and how many people are attending to just be totally online. So we're just adjusting on the fly. And I will also say this, that we set up the classes to be able to quickly move online if the health conditions were to deteriorate on the island, where we don't feel it's safe to be putting people in the classroom any longer. And so that's for both the safety of the students and the faculty, right? That we don't want to put people at risk if we don't have to. But right now, I mean, our island is one of the safest places in the country that you can possibly be, right? Our infection rate is very low. We'd like to see it stay that way. And so that's why we're still trying to follow all the social distancing, mask wearing and everything, so that we keep everybody that comes here safe.
Okay, that's also a question, like, God forbid that there is a rise. I know Cal State San Francisco, you know, prorated and refunded the students' housing money and their food money. Is that something Hilo does or no? If she were to have to come back, let's say in October because something happened regards with the virus.
Farah, you want to take that?
So I can say that in the spring, we did honor prorated refunds for both housing and for the meal plan. You know, we really hope this doesn't happen again. I mean, it was a mad scramble. So there is already some precedent in place that I would, find some comfort in, but we will treat the situation as it comes at that moment. I can't say right now what the answer would be. But I do want to also address a question that came up, or a comment that came up earlier. We are still taking applications for financial aid. So for those families who may be concerned about finances right now, if you haven't applied for financial aid yet, it is not too late. Visit our financial aid website, submit an application, call our office if you need help walking through that process. We know that there are definitely changing times there, and our office is able to help and answer questions. Also help people process through some of the questions that have come up on this call.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys, and thank you for your time.
Okay, a couple of other questions in the chat. One was about, when you should time your arrival to be able to do the in-person orientation, and it looks like the 3rd or the 4th is the time. Your travel day is not a quarantine day, as I understand it. Someone else asked about accommodations with kitchenettes. My knowledge of at least the 2 larger hotels in Hilo is that they do not, for the most part, have kitchen facilities. But when we have these arrangements made, we can push that information out. So Trinity has tried to ask a question for a long time, so I'm going to go ahead and or you can unmute yourself, I think. Maybe.
Okay, so my bid, and again, with the housing, my plan to be housing is I'm gonna be rooming with people who are not students. Like I'm gonna be renting a room, and we're each gonna have separate rooms, but then a shared bathroom and kitchen. So would that work for quarantine, or should I be trying to find something else?
That does not work for quarantine if you're going to be sharing any space with other people, particularly if they're already here and they're not members of your current household. So you would have to quarantine elsewhere, because you need to be able to guarantee that your living space, bathroom, and any kitchen facility, should you want one, are used exclusively by you.
Okay. And then my other question was, where do I go to cancel a loan? I don't know where to handle that.
To cancel what?
A loan. I'm getting financial aid for a loan, but I don't know how to cancel it because I don't want it.
That would be done through the financial aid office.
Correct.
Okay.
And our financial aid director is on this call, so absolutely reach out to our financial aid office, and one of our financial aid counselors can help you with that.
Okay, sweet. Thank you.
Thank you. Gabriela Aguilar. You want to go ahead?
Hi. So first of all, thank you for this. This is really informative. Also, so my question is for online classes, for people who struggle, let's say, when it comes to not being in person and taught in person, is there going to be any way to work with us, I mean, calling myself out, me specifically, to not fail? Because, it's difficult and it's different.
So I'll let Ken jump in here as well, but during the spring when we had to jump online, we tried to provide as much support as possible. At the end of the spring semester, we surveyed everyone and got information about what worked and what didn't work for people online, so that was helpful. We've also set aside some of our CARES funding precisely to hire students to help us in the online environment, both as kind of, peer assistance and to, in some cases, help the faculty as well. Ken, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, one thing we're doing is we're adding a lot of staff to the Kilohana, to the tutoring center. And so I think the thing to do is make sure you reach out to the tutoring center and ask for help as well. But also, if you should be reaching out to the faculty member, and in the online component of this, we expect our faculty to be providing online office hours and things where you can ask questions and get help with homework and, you know, help adjust. So I don't know exactly what your problems are, Gabriella, but if you want, you can contact me either through my office number or you can email me at vcaa@hawaii.edu, and we can talk about this later to try and develop something specific for you. But we definitely do, we realize that there's a lot of people that struggle when they go online, and part of that's learning how to schedule and things like that as well.
No, yeah, thank you so much. I know that definitely this university is very good with being very helpful all the time. So thank you for everything.
So a few questions in the chat. Again, if you're going to be quarantining at someone's residence, you have to be isolated within that residence. So for example, I have a guest room in my home that has a bathroom en suite. That would be acceptable if, you know, my guest were to stay all the way in that room and not come into any of the common areas. Someone asked about outside exercise. Someone else answered it correctly. You cannot leave your room because as soon as you leave your room, you are potentially mixing with other people. And the person who conveniently answered that question is the next one up for me. So Miles Culhane, do you have a question for us? Go ahead and unmute. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. I really do appreciate this. It's been very informative, even though it's been a little depressing. But regarding, first of all, a few questions. If our student is going to check into the dorm, and we've got an incoming freshman, should they time their arrival so they can check into the dorm, for example, the Friday before the 24th, or would you be able to check in after you clear quarantine? Would you be able to check in on that weekend before the 24th?
I believe you can still check in on the weekend. Farah, do you want to take that?
Correct. So as long as you have cleared quarantine, students can start checking into the residence halls as early as August 18.
But just to clarify, that would include weekends. You could
Correct.
You could
Weekends
check in on a
included.
weekend or a
Yes.
Saturday or Sunday.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned earlier staggered check-in. Will a student be notified when their staggered period arises to check in?
Yes, students will actually be given the opportunity to sign up for the times that are most appropriate for them. And so for that, we are going to be sending messages directly to our student residents. And that will be coming out hopefully in the next week or so, as soon as we get all of our additional assignments in place.
And so my last question, and I'm sorry to dominate it a little bit here at the end, but what about the other activities that make this sort of a campus, well, an exciting freshman experience? You know, we have the dining, you have the clubs, you have the gym, you have intramural activities. I anticipate that all those are somehow heavily impacted.
So many of them will be, yes. However, we recognize that we still need to facilitate the experience for our students coming back. Otherwise, what's the reason to physically come back? I will say for the gym and Student Life Center, the reopening of that facility will depend heavily on Governor Ige's proclamations. For those of you that have been monitoring, we opened up some gyms on the island of Oahu recently, and within days, the number of incidences increased significantly. So we are not yet, we have not made a decision on whether or not the Student Life Center will be opening in full or in part, but that will be made before the start of classes. As far as all other activities, the first year experience program continues, and they will be doing programming. They actually are the program that coordinates orientation. I just answered a question in the chat. That is the program that also oversees our Mentor Collective. Mentor Collective, our peer mentoring program for first year and transfer students, does continue. And we've already started matching mentors with mentees. So if you're a student first year and hasn't signed up for that, that opportunity is still available. The other activities that we normally have, where it's open and people just come through at their convenience, that will be readjusted. Some activities will be capped at a maximum number based on the size and the space of the area that it's happening in. Other activities and programs will have a virtual component to accommodate those students who are not here with us physically. And yet again, other activities may have multiple sessions where the same activity is offered and students may have to join by appointment. So the different precautions we're having to take as a result of social distancing is impacting what we're doing. However, we are still committed to making sure that students, both here with us physically and those away, are afforded the opportunity to engage and connect with the various activities, events, and programs on campus.
Okay, there's been discussion in the chat about Airbnb. This is a state policy. This is not a university policy. That Airbnbs, if you are going to be there for fewer than 30 days, are considered short-term rentals, and short-term rentals are not allowed to be a quarantine place. That is a decision of the state. Frankly, I mean, one of the things that is meant to do is discourage tourists, but it does apply to all. We have 3 questions really quickly here in the chat. Armando, do you want to go ahead? You're going to need to unmute yourself. I can't seem to do it from here.
Oh, we already asked our questions, Chancellor. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Okay. So next up, Rita Duenas.
Hi, I'm zooming in from Guam. My son is actually, he didn't make the call, I don't know why, but anyway, he's actually a grad student and we're coming from Guam, but, and he did secure his dorm reservation, but if we don't, the earliest he could actually get to Hilo is the 5th, and I'm sorry, a couple minutes late, so if maybe you can give a brief summary of how it's gonna work with the hotel and possibly being afforded. We tried the Airbnb thing, but they told us it had to be a 30-day rental, so, but the earliest we can get there is the 5th. And he's a grad student, so he does have online orientation, which helps, but at the same time, he really wants to get there on time. So we're just worried about the quarantine.
Yes, you will be able to start the quarantine upon arrival. We're still working out the details in terms of contracts with local hotels to see what the exact dates would be. And depending on the number of students needing quarantining space, that will determine how far our university funding will go, but we are going to try to cover as much of the cost as we can. And we are also going to get you the information in terms of available dates again as soon as we can.
He just has to fill out the survey, correct?
Yeah. Yes, everyone should fill out the survey. I can't stress that enough. So someone asked if you do have the wherewithal to rent an Airbnb for 30 days or more. I believe that's allowed. I would double check with both Airbnb and again, read the state policy. Looking for the governor's proclamation on number 10 that has the latest information on that. Okay, things are coming more quickly than I can keep up. So Stacy Balancio, you want to go ahead and ask your question? Stacy, I don't hear you. You want to unmute?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay, so I kind of just jumped in, so I'm not sure what was said and done. I'm sorry if it's a repeat for everybody, but my daughter is coming from Oahu, and there's no quarantine, right?
Right.
And
So-
then I made her flight for the 17th, and we have family up there. So my thing is, when she comes in, are you guys can she just come in on the 18th, is there a way that she has to be assigned to come in to get her room? Like, how does that go?
Yeah, Farah, do you want to take that? We are making appointments for check-in, I believe.
Absolutely. So if your daughter has already committed to housing, have her be on the lookout for communication from housing regarding signing up for check-in appointments, where she will be able to designate the day and time, and we will confirm so that all of that information is clear. At the time of confirmation, we will also update as to whether or not others are allowed to assist with the move-in, and if so, how many, what is the number, what is the max number?
Are you guys, are they having their own room, or are they still having suite mates?
Rooms that previously housed 4 students are only housing 2, and those that housed 2 will only house 1. The exception, I should say, which I missed earlier, is Alahonua. Because Alahonua has 2 rooms that ultimately get closed off at the end of every night, the living situation in Alahonua remains the same. 1 person per bedroom, 2 people per suite.
Okay, so my daughter is at Halekihau.
Yes, so Halekihau will be 1 person per bedroom.
Okay.
They share a bathroom, so there will be 2 per suite.
Right, got it. And then also students that you haven't notified them yet of the sign up for coming in, right?
Correct. That will be
Okay.
coming probably next week sometime.
No, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take one more question, and that's going to be Karen. And I do apologize for everybody else. When you got the notice of this meeting, there was an email address. If you send your question, we will get you an answer as soon as we can. So Karen, Labhan Wong.
Hi. So I have a follow-up question. On the Airbnb, you said if you only rent it for 2 weeks, that doesn't qualify. But if you rented an Airbnb for the month, you come in 2 weeks early, the student stays with you for the 2 weeks, but you continue on, does that then qualify?
Yeah, I believe if it's 30 days, you can.
Okay, and then I missed the question on how do you get from the airport to wherever you're going to be?
You may do a taxi or Uber.
Oh, okay, Uber, just not shared Uber then.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense then. All right, great, that was it, thank you.
So thank you so much, mahalo nui loa, for your patience as we work through all of these details. Survey forthcoming within the hour, I believe. And thank you to my team for being here to answer questions. We will do the best we can to get you the information we have as soon as we have it. We are committed at UH Hilo to accommodating our students as best we can and making sure that you can continue on your educational journey with us. And we will continue to do what we can to help you through this really confusing time. So stay safe and aloha, and thank you for participating this afternoon.